torchlight trembled against the stone as Spartacus stepped forward, his footsteps barely breaking the silence. A row of silent watchers waited ahead, unmoving. Between them stood a worn wooden post, its surface carved by countless men before him. Spartacus paused, breathed once, and placed his hand on the scarred wood, not in surrender, but in quiet defiance of the fate Rome intended for him.
Long before his name unsettled senators and commanders, Spartacus was a Thracian caught between survival and the growing reach of Rome. Born around 111 BCE among the tribes of the Balkans, he lived in a world where shifting alliances and Roman expansion forced warriors into choices that rarely ended well. Spartacus served as an auxiliary in the Roman legions, fighting not for Rome's glory, but for the necessities imposed on men living along its borders. His skill was evident, but so was his unwillingness to be treated as disposable. Somewhere in those years, he broke with his Roman superiors, whether through desertion or defiance, sources disagree, and the punishment was uncompromising. Once seized, Spartacus was not executed as Rome often did with rebels. Instead, he was deemed fit for profit. Enslaved, stripped of rank and identity, he was sold into the gladiatorial system that fueled Roman entertainment. Transported to Capua, he entered the ludus of Lentulus Batiatus, one of Italy's most demanding gladiator schools. There, men trained as products, bodies meant to bleed, suffer, and thrill audiences with violence disguised as honor. New recruits were evaluated with cold efficiency. Spartacus's physique, discipline, and battlefield experience made him ideal for high-stakes combat. But what set him apart wasn't strength, it was his silent refusal to break. While others bent beneath the routines of drills, punishments, and rigid schedules, Spartacus observed the guards, the walls, the gates. Gladiator training forged obedience through exhaustion, yet Spartacus treated every moment as reconnaissance. Even during sparring sessions, he studied how the system worked, memorizing weaknesses disguised as routine. By the time weeks had passed, those around him sensed something unusual. Spartacus did not carry the despair that defined most new fighters. Instead, he carried calculation, a quiet flame that neither chains nor discipline smothered. In Capua, Rome believed it had acquired a valuable gladiator. In reality, it had trapped a man already measuring the limits of the cage built around him.
Life inside the ludus followed a rhythm designed to crush initiative. Dawn drills, midday sparring, evening confinement. Yet beneath this rigid order, resentment simmered. Gladiators were valuable, but they were also volatile. Men forced to live with the knowledge that their deaths were scheduled for entertainment. Spartacus sensed this pressure building long before it broke. He watched tempers flare during training, witnessed guards wield authority like weapons, and understood that Rome's greatest mistake was believing misery could be contained indefinitely. By early 73 BCE, tensions inside the school reached a breaking point. Food rations had been reduced, punishments had grown harsher, and whispers moved through the barracks more quickly than the guards realized. Spartacus was not the only one who had been studying opportunity. A small group of Thracians, Gauls, and Greeks began exchanging stolen tools, kitchen knives, scraps of metal sharpened against stone, anything that could be held like a blade. Their plan was desperate and imprecise, built on the knowledge that waiting meant death in the arena. Historical accounts say about 70 men participated in the attempt. They seized their moment when guards grew complacent during evening preparations. The first strike was crude but effective. A cook's knife plunged into a guard's throat before he could shout. Chaos erupted instantly. Spartacus and the others surged through the corridors, overwhelming surprised overseers and breaking into storerooms where real weapons were stored. For the first time since captivity, iron swords filled their hands instead of wooden practice blades. The gladiators did not flee blindly. Spartacus led them out of Capua with instinct, sharpened by years of warfare. They captured wagons loaded with arms, pushed through Roman patrols, and vanished into the countryside before the authorities fully understood what had occurred. Rome labeled the revolt a minor disturbance, an inconvenience soon to be resolved. But the men who escaped with Spartacus felt something very different. For the first time, they had chosen their own direction. They gathered on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, a place steep and defensible, overlooking the plains of Campania. There, as fires burned against the night sky, the reality of what they had done settled around them. They were no longer slaves. They were fugitives, armed with nothing but desperation, courage, and the leadership of a man whose resolve had become a beacon. Rome would come for them. Spartacus understood this. What Rome did not understand was that these men had already lost everything fear could take. And such men, united, were capable of reshaping fate.
On the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, what began as a desperate escape hardened into purpose. At first, the fugitives were barely more than a cluster of exhausted men with stolen weapons. But word travels quickly among the oppressed. Enslaved workers from nearby farms, shepherds hiding in the hills, and deserters fleeing their own punishments drifted toward the mountain. They came not because they knew Spartacus, but because they recognized something in the spark he had lit, the rare chance to refuse Rome's domination. Within weeks, their numbers had swelled into the thousands. Rome responded with predictable arrogance. Praetor Gaius Claudius Glauber moved to encircle the rebels, assuming they were disorganized criminals too frightened to challenge a disciplined force. He blocked the main paths with troops and waited for starvation to do the rest. But Spartacus had no intention of dying on Roman terms. Using vines cut from the mountainside, he and his men descended the sheer cliffs at night, an approach considered impossible, and launched the surprise assault on Glauber's camp. The Roman lines collapsed under the ferocity of men fighting not for glory, but for the right to exist. Victories followed in rapid succession. Spartacus defeated the forces of Verenius and Cosinius, seizing weapons, armor, and supplies that transformed the fugitives into a functioning army. Leadership emerged naturally. Spartacus as overall commander, with Crixus and Enomaus leading contingents of Gauls and other groups. Their goals varied. Some wanted freedom beyond Italy, others vengeance on Rome. Yet Spartacus held them together through discipline and a shared understanding that fragmentation meant destruction. By 72 BCE, the revolt had become impossible to ignore. Estimates suggest the rebel army reached 40 to 70,000 strong, a force larger than some Roman legions. They moved with unexpected precision, striking supply depots, freeing slaves, and challenging Roman authority across southern Italy. Spartacus pushed for a march north, toward the Alps, where escape could be permanent. The idea carried reason and hope, but his followers, flush with victory and hungry for retribution, were reluctant to abandon a war they believed they could win outright. Still, Rome was no longer underestimating them. The Senate realized these were not bandits hiding in the hills, but an organized, mobile army led by a commander whose tactics consistently outmatched Roman expectations. For the first time, genuine fear began to thread through the corridors of power. Spartacus was no longer merely a runaway gladiator. He had become the architect of a rebellion that challenged the very foundations of Roman control.
Rome's embarrassment could no longer be concealed behind dismissive reports and half-hearted campaigns. By late 72 BCE, The Senate realized this uprising had grown beyond the reach of ordinary commanders. Spartacus had shattered consular forces, outmaneuvered praetors, and destabilized entire regions of Italy. The Republic needed a man with wealth, discipline, and political ambition as ruthless as the crisis itself. They found him in Marcus Licinius Crassus. Crassus accepted command with a determination that bordered on obsession. Unlike his predecessors, he did not underestimate the rebels. He reorganized his legions, enforced strict discipline, and revived the ancient punishment of decimation, killing every 10th soldier in failing units, to remind his men that defeat was not an option. Rome had been humiliated enough. Crassus intended to end the rebellion, not contain it. Meanwhile, Spartacus again attempted what he believed to be the only viable path to survival, a march north toward the Alps. If his army could break free of Italy, thousands might return to their homelands. But unity within the ranks fractured. Crixus and a large force of Gauls and Germans broke away, driven by their desire to continue raiding Roman territories. Crassus struck them swiftly, annihilating their splinter group near Mount Garganus. The death of Crixus was more than a tactical loss. It was a blow to the fragile cohesion Spartacus had fought to maintain. In response, Spartacus compelled his army to engage Crassus directly, defeating 2 divisions and forcing the Roman commander into temporary retreat. Yet even in victory, Spartacus saw the shifting tide. Crassus was not like the others. He adapted, he learned, he reinforced his legions with hardened veterans and constructed massive fortifications across the narrow land route at Rhegium, effectively trapping the rebels in the southern peninsula. The famous trench and wall system stretched for miles, a deliberate attempt to starve the uprising into surrender.
By early 71 BCE, the rebellion had reached its final, narrowing corridor of survival. Crassus's fortifications blocked escape to the south, while Roman reinforcements pressed from the north. Spartacus knew that time, provisions, and options were all diminishing at once. Yet within the rebel camp there was no panic, only a grim collective understanding that the next battle would decide everything. The men who had followed him from the gladiator school to the edges of Italy stood ready not because victory was assured, but because their commander had given them something Rome never could, the chance to choose their fate. Historical accounts describe a final attempt by Spartacus to break the Roman line, a maneuver executed with a clarity that reveals his enduring military instinct. Before the last engagement began, he is said to have slain his own horse, declaring he would not need an animal for escape. The gesture was symbolic, a message to his men that he fought as one of them, not a general seeking survival, but a leader willing to share their end. It hardened morale. The rebels charged with a ferocity born of desperation and conviction. The battlefield near the Salaris River became a storm of clashing formations. Spartacus fought his way toward Crassus himself, cutting down centurions and soldiers in his path. The sources vary in detail, but agree on one point. Spartacus pushed deeper into enemy lines than any commander standing against Rome had reason to. Surrounded and outnumbered, he continued fighting until he vanished beneath the press of bodies. No Roman ever claimed his corpse. No relic of him was displayed in triumph. In death, he denied Rome the final satisfaction of parading him as a conquered enemy. The aftermath was brutal. Crassus ordered roughly 6,000 surviving rebels crucified along the Appian Way, turning the road from Capua to Rome into a corridor of suffering meant to deter future uprisings. Yet despite this display, the Senate could not claim complete victory. Spartacus's story spread through whispers, then through generations, outliving the men who sought to erase him. His rebellion did not topple Rome, but it exposed the fractures within an empire built on the labor and silence of the enslaved. Spartacus left no writings, monuments, or recorded speeches. What remained was a legacy carried by those who understood why he fought. Rome controlled the world, but it could not control memory, and memory is where Spartacus endured. Not as a gladiator, not as a slave, but as a man who refused to accept the limits imposed upon him.